Today I want to introduce you to Dorothy, my electric kiln. Now the kilns at school are set up just the same way, so we're going to go over the parts of the kiln and how they all work together. Now, if you notice, this red box on the outside is the computer control panel, which controls the heating elements inside the kiln. What's nice is I can program in the firing sequence I want, and the computer will control it. In the old days, we used to have to set timers and alarm clocks so we knew when to turn the kiln up to the next temperature. Now, if you want to know what's behind this, if you look on the front of this kiln, there's a row like this that goes down behind this red box. This is a kiln where I've stripped out all the electronics, and I'm going to build a raku kiln this summer to fire raku work in. So I stripped off all the electronics last winter, so worked out that you could see it. Now, the parts of the kiln, powering the whole thing, is 240 service, like your mom's washer and dryer, coming out. Cable goes in, comes in the side of the box. The electricity goes in here. Now, as the kiln fires, once it passes 1,000 degrees, off-gassing starts to happen, where the organics burn out of the clay and some other things start to happen and produces noxious vapor. So there's a vent system for this kiln. There's a couple very small holes drilled into the top. On the bottom, there is a cup that covers a couple of small holes on the bottom that pulls the gases out of that. It is hooked to this vent that's pulled out with this motor, and then it's pumped outside into the atmosphere. So that's everything on the outside of the kiln. Now looking on the inside, we'll open Dorothy up. Now if you notice on the very bottom, that's what the kiln looks like on the floor, and those are those three little vent holes that are inside the cup. And I have little kiln stilts on the bottom of the kiln. That's where the shelf will sit. This side of the kiln is loaded like it was be fired. If you notice, I've got guard cones at every level. These melt at the middle one melts at the right temperature. The one to the left melts at a very lower temperature, and the one to the right melts at a very higher. So it tells me if I'm getting an even fire throughout the whole kiln, and I usually set them up just this way. On the very top, I put a couple of bisque pieces in here. You always make sure you got an inch or two of space between the top and your piece that you put up in here. Now, the computer knows what's going on inside the kiln because the thermocouple, which is right here, is like a thermometer. It measures the temperature inside the kiln. Then the computer knows how much heat to put in. These wire elements are what go through the holes that were over on that kiln into the computer. They run around the inside of the kiln. They're what heat up and produce heat in the kiln. And so that's what causes the inside of the kiln to get really hot. Now this kiln, Dorothy's about a 7.5 cubic foot kiln. The kilns we have at school are 9.5 cubic foot kilns. The first kiln I started out with was like a 2.5 foot cubic kiln. So what you do is when you put pieces in here, if you're doing bisqueware, they can touch each other and you can stack them up. If you're doing a glaze fire, which I've kind of set these guys up so you can see, you have to maintain at least a space as wide as your finger between the pots, and they can't touch anything. They have to be away from the sides and everything. But when you do a bisqueware, you can stack things, you can pack them in here really tight. So it always takes more space to do a glaze fire than a bisque fire. Over here on the side is a holdover from older days. These are called peepholes. And what you used to have to do is you would have to stack your kiln so you could see the cones on the inside, and you'd check through the peephole, and when the cone melted at the right temperature, you'd turn the temperature up. And so these are actually just a holdover from another time. But they still put them in kilns just in case you want to watch your cones. But I've been using the computer for 5 or 6 years now, and it has worked out really, really well. There's also a switch for the electric motor over here that I didn't show you. The kiln furniture, ouch. You use the stilts depending on how big your pots are. So this is just kind of a 1-inch spacer. So however tall your pots are, you want at least an inch and a half, I like, between the next shelf and your pottery piece. So you can go all the way up. I think I've got 10-inch stilts. I only have 3 of these because I only do one side at a time. But the 8s, I got a lot of 6s because a lot of my stuff tends to be just under 6 inches tall. So that is the pieces and parts of an electric kiln. The one at school works exactly the same way as this one. And hopefully now at least you have a working idea of how an electric kiln works.